Um, Once again, I'm Kim. I am currently a site reliability engineer, which I had mentioned this morning is sort of like a slice of DevOps. And so you all requested a DevOps lesson. I punted that to the second objective, which we may not actually get to. And part of that is DevOps is one of those words that means something different to every company, to every person. It at once had like a very specific meaning that doesn't necessarily have anymore. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you how to set up an AWS EC2 Ubuntu instance and SSH onto that machine. And so what we're going to do is you're going to use AWS. You're going to turn on a computer somewhere in AWS's data centers, and then I'm going to show you how to SSH onto it and just kind of poke around. And if you think this is cool, you should consider looking into DevOps stuff. If you don't think it's cool, that's fine as well. But this is just like a taste of you might like DevOps if you enjoy this. So, yes.
So, Kim, what was the term you used for the tool that you're saying you're transitioning people's backend or their infrastructure from like servers to like AWS? What was the in between?
So we use a tool called Kubernetes. And so what that is you set up a bunch of AWS instances, and then you run Kubernetes on top of those, and then Kubernetes orchestrates all of your containers. It's called a container orchestrator. And so you have all of these Docker containers that are like your application or things that interact with your application. And in Kubernetes, you say, I want 5 versions of this application running at all times. Maybe when I hit a certain threshold of users, then I want you to create 10, like it scales up.
So specifically for sizing or for redundancy, or what's the...
Both.
So like the time of whatever, and have my like this application running on one of them, and this kind of application, is that kind of how you split it?
You can do that too. So you would containerize all of those applications, and like Kubernetes doesn't really care what language you're using for your application. It just cares that that the number you want exists and they're running properly and that people can access them. Kubernetes is hard to grok when you're a bootcamp student or when you've never used it before, because it's mostly used in like pretty large settings. So there's not a lot of good ways to be like, let's practice Kubernetes in like a really authentic way. Whereas I do think you can build a web app and like it kind of gets at the heart of what web application development is. But
does it do the trick?
Let's talk after. You sound like you're interested, which is awesome.
Yep.
So, like I said, 2 objectives. We're going to set up an EC2 instance and SSH onto it. If we have time, we'll define DevOps. What I would like you to do is I'd like you to go to my GitHub page. It's GitHub, and then my username is Kim Schless. No worries. Yeah, KIMSCHLES. And then if you go to this pinned repository, which is called Schlesinger Knowledge, and then you're going to have to go to the actual wiki part. So Kyle Koberle actually showed me this. I take all my notes in this wiki for the most part now. And it's really cool because I used to take notes by hand, and I was like, what notebook is that thing in? And now I keep all my notes in here so I can search through them. But if you go and you unfurl this pages, and if you search the term DevOps, I want you to go to the Getting into DevOps page. So I'm going to go from the beginning if you need to see that again. So if you go to my GitHub account, you go to Schlesinger Knowledge, then you go to the actual wiki, then you are just going to search for DevOps. There's a lot of DevOps stuff, so it's Getting into DevOps. So I put together this set of materials for a lot of people asked me, how do you get into DevOps? And I was like, I told like 5 people, and then I was like, maybe I should just write that down and give them a link because it's a lot easier. So if you are interested, and this might be post Flatiron, it's totally cool. Here are some recommendations. But the thing that we're going to do is this bottom, this set up an EC2 Ubuntu instance. So if you want to follow along with a tutorial, you can click on that. If you don't want to follow along, I'll also show you how to do it all. got this big picture. So will you just give me a thumbs up at your chest when you feel like you're ready to move on? Cool. So this is optional, but if you want to follow along the tutorial, or if you want to go back and do this later this weekend, create an Ubuntu EC2 instance.
Why your chest?
So if you're not ready and you're doing a thumbs down, you don't have to show all of your peers. Okay. Then it's like between you and me, kind of. I mean, it's not completely private, but yeah. All right. So, all right. There's a lot of words on that first objective, and let me make a copy of those and have them hanging. So, first thing, set up an AWS EC2 Ubuntu instance. I actually just want you to take a moment and think about all that you know. What is AWS? It's all right if you're like, I don't know. It's something about Amazon. And then just turn and talk to somebody next to you and just talk about what you already know about Amazon Web Services. Go. All right, go ahead and wrap up your conversation. I'm curious, like, what are some things you know about AWS? So let's start with somebody on this side of the room. You can shout it out.
All right, I know nothing, by the way, but I think it's like you basically pay them for different, like, you know, like you can rent time on their servers, or processing power, or that sort of thing.
Yeah. So what you're doing is you're paying to borrow Amazon's computers. Like, they have all of these giant data centers all over the place, and it's called cloud computing. And just what that means is, instead of your company having a data center where there's actual people dealing with hardware, doing software patches, like fixing things on the computer, you pay someone else to do and manage that, and then you get all of the cool compute things on it. Yes?
And so someone, like, if I or someone wanted to scale up, like, they'd be looking for a solution like this, a larger server, or?
Yeah, potentially. Or let's say you're like, even if you're like, okay, my company does have a data center and we have all these computers, but there's maybe not enough memory or CPU on them, then you could pay Amazon to do that. And once you are like on Amazon, it's really easy to say like, well, I was using the smaller computer, but I want to switch to a bigger size computer. That's very easy to do. So what else do you know about AWS? Somebody from over here. Yeah.
It's a combination of infrastructure as a service and platform as a service.
Yeah, yep. So infrastructure as a service is like computers that you rent, and then platform as a service. Amazon Web Services has like a million things that you can use from them. So what kind of, what version of SQL do you all use in this program? SQLite. So Amazon has its own like relational database service that you can run SQL commands on that easily installs on their computers, and like you can basically like use that instead of SQLite. So it's like a really big field. It's been historically the only part of Amazon that's actually making money. And Amazon has a lion's share of the market. But Google has its own version. It's called Google Cloud Platform. Microsoft has a version called Azure. DigitalOcean does a lot of stuff like this. So I guarantee wherever your first job is, like you're probably going to be sending your code to somewhere in the cloud.
Can you use non-relational like Mongo?
Yeah, so you can either install Mongo, like we're going to set up our own computer. You could literally just install Mongo in that computer and use it, Or if you didn't want to deal with like Mongo stuff, Amazon has a version, I think it's called Atlas DB, which is the Amazon brand of MongoDB. So that's like a huge topic. It took me a really long time to like wrap my head around what the cloud is. So if you don't feel super solid on it after 5 minutes, that's no problem. So what we're going to do is we're going to use one of their services that's called EC2. And so go ahead and log into your account. Am I already logged in? Oh no. It's unfortunately not obvious where you log in all the time. Oh yeah, you should get a password manager if you don't already have one. This one is 1Password. This one, I have it in Firefox, but like my company also uses that. So I don't have my personal passwords in my Firefox version, but they are on the system version. A little complicated. All right, once you're in the management console, if you go to the services tab, you can just see like the giant amount of services that Amazon offers. The thing you want is EC2. You can either find it under compute or you can search for it. And I'm just going to get this out of the way. I'm just going to walk around and see if you're here.
Yeah.
Oh, I like that too. Oh. So you're going to He's going to watch. Yeah. All right. I'd rather you do it than
well, I'm also mod 1 right now. So.
It doesn't matter. It really does not matter. I'm just showing you exactly.
Okay.
No excuse. Mod 1. Mod 1 doesn't mean anything to me either. All right, what does EC2 stand for? I heard somebody over here say it. Elastic Compute? 2. So what we're going to do is we're going to press a lot of buttons that will give us some section of an Amazon computer. And the Ubuntu part, that's the operating system that we're going to choose to use. So Ubuntu is a Linux distribution. It's a really popular one. I see a lot of Macs here. Your operating system on your computer is Mac OS. Maybe there's some Linux users here. Do you know what distribution you use on your Linux machine? Ubuntu. That was a really common one. So you get to play with a new operating system if you haven't done that before. So I'm a little torn on how to show you versus like, watch me, now you do it, watch me, now you do it. So for this first part, please don't follow along with me. Actually, just watch, and then I'll let you do your own thing, and I'll be able to come and help. So step 1 is we want to just create an instance. So right now it says I have 0 running instances. And so what I'm going to do is just go to instances and see if there's a way to do this quickly. All right, launch instance, I'm curious. All right, launch instance. Okay, so it says choose an Amazon machine image, and that's the operating system that this computer is going to have. So Amazon has its own version of Linux, which is this Amazon Linux. There's Red Hat Linux. I'm not even SUS, I'm not sure how you say that Linux. The one that we're going to use is this Ubuntu server, and it says free tier eligible, so it's not a whole lot of compute power, but it's going to get us up and running. We're going to do the 64-bit x86. That's a CPU architecture that is common on laptops, and I'm just going to select that. So that's the first thing. Just general purpose, whatever is free tier eligible. I think that's all we need to do. Yep, and then I'm just going to review and launch. Cool. All right, so I'm going to show you how to do this, and then I'm going to let you do it. So now it says select an existing key pair or create a new key pair. So if you want to have access to the new computer that you are using, you have to prove your identity. And the way that we're going to do that is with a PEM key. And so I don't think I have any, so I'm going to create a new key pair, and you can name it whatever you want. I'm going to name mine Flatiron School Demo.pem. And then I'm going to download that key pair, and it's just going to go straight to my download folder, and we'll deal with that later. Cool. So what I did was I went to the instance. What Amazon machine image did I choose? There was like a long list. I clicked the Ubuntu one that says free tier eligible, so you don't get charged. And then, I don't know, maybe I clicked a few other things, launch instances, and then I created this key pair, and you'll need to do that, and you'll need to download it. So I'll know you're ready to go on when somewhere, maybe probably your downloads folder, I can see your key pair. So go right ahead, I'll be floating around. Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah. Did you not? Actually, for me, it's a big part of it. Not everybody. Yeah. Nice. I see some people just kind of exploring the different types of machine images. That's totally cool. Really? Oh, yes.
Was it review or configure instance?
You can click through that. There's a bunch of options. We're not going to select any of those options.
Yeah.
So if you want to look at them, go right ahead. But you just want to get to this point. I think so.
You just name it whatever you want.
Name it whatever you want. Let's take a look.
Sorry.
That's all right.
I,
Oh, I think you just need to click launch.
oh, okay. Oh, yeah. All right. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
Not yet.
So we're doing we're looking at the little
Yes.
On this screen, is it review and launch or next to figure? It's like.
Both will get you to the same. You and the next will give you a lot more options. You don't remember this one.
Yeah.
The options.
Oh, okay. So you're saying next.
Yeah, you'll get to the same destination. All right, I think almost everybody's here. Once you've downloaded the key pair, make sure you download it. Then go ahead and click Launch Instances. If you've already done it, no problem. So it says, your following instance launches have been initiated. You actually want to click on that. And you can see that my instance is pending. It's still initializing. So that's what you want.
Can you download the key pair if you forgot to? Would you like to get it again?
I believe, yeah. I don't know how though. I mean, like I understand, but I don't know exactly.
Oh, no, I got it.
Oh, yeah.
I was just kidding.
Sorry.
That's okay.
I'm getting an error.
Error.
Who doesn't like it? It should be true.
I don't know. Try naming something different.
Yeah.
There you go. I think I just needed more letters. Maybe take the dot pen off.
Oh, okay.
I think that's what you're gonna SSH into. So you're gonna
Yeah, it's a-
Exit out and just like open that up again.
Yeah.
I know.
Creating key pair.
Someone's running creating this on.
You have to download.
weird. I don't know. And maybe I'll just talk. Oh, there we go. So weird. Okay, thank
Yeah,
you.
that was weird. That was not you.
Thanks.
Probably 30 people are doing it at once.
It might be. Sometimes that happens. I'm trying to think of lessons we do at Galvanize, or even like when you're installing software. Sometimes it's like, all right, all 50 of you go download Node.js, and like the Node.js servers are like, it's a little much actually. All right. Guess what you did? You just set up an AWS EC2 Ubuntu instance. Give yourself a round. Now, to do more interesting things, you want to be able to access the command line of that computer. So the way that we're going to do that is something called SSH. And so I'm going to show you how to do that. This is another one like please watch and then do. I will say this is nice. If you go to the Connect and you're at the standalone SSH client, it gives you all the instructions, which is really cool. And so if you don't know, this is how I like kind of knew I wanted to be a DevOps engineer. SSH is a way of accessing another computer like from your command line. And so it's a way of getting onto other computers, and I thought that was super cool. So the way that you do it is you need this public DNS. So this is like the public address of your EC2 instance. And you do SSH, and then you say, this is my identity. And the identity is actually going to be that file, that PEM. And so my PEM is in my downloads folder, and I think I called it fisdemopem.pem. And then you have to say what user you are. And so for this Ubuntu machine, it's Ubuntu, let's see if I can spell it right, Ubuntu at, and then that. All of this are in these directions, and you can like copy them. So this is not going to work. Let's see why not. So it's saying like, can I connect with this computer? Is that okay with you? And I say, yes, that's fine. And then I get this big error, and it looks really scary. It says, unprotected private key file. And then it's saying something about permissions. It's saying this permissions number are too open, and maybe other people can access them, and I don't like that. Like, knock it off. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to change the permissions on that file, and the way that I do this is this command. And so I'll just go into my downloads folder. So if I change into downloads and I look in there, that's my PEM key. You don't have to worry about this part, but if I look, oh, that didn't do what I wanted. So if you do ls-la, it will show you the permissions that each thing in that directory has. And so this is my PEM, and so it's read, write, read, and read. I can't remember, the columns mean something. And I believe that the write permission is too open for SSHing onto a machine, and so we need to take off that write. And so the way that we do that is that hmod or chmod, that stands for change, I don't know what it stands for, change mod 400. So we're saying instead of 644, let's do 400, and the name of that is that. And then if I do ls-la, oh yeah, looks like only the user me gets to read that. So no one else can mess with my file. All right, so then I'm going to clear my screen. I don't know if you know this. I did not know this until recently. If you type history, you get a list of your last 500 commands. I'm going to go back to my home directory. And so I want to run this command again. And so the way that I do that, it's number 504. So if I do bang, the exclamation point 504, it runs that command for me. Yeah, that should have been the lesson. And then if you look, that prompt there, it's no longer my normal prompt, which is like Kim Schless or whatever it is. Like saying, hey, this is your MacBook Pro. This is saying, hey, you are the Ubuntu user on that IP address. So now I'm on the machine. Yeah. Honestly, we're not going to do anything interesting once you've SSH'd onto the machine, but that was a crap ton of information. So let's review. So the first thing I did was I intentionally tried to SSH onto the machine with having the permissions to open on that file. Then I changed the permissions with chmod 400. Then I went back and ran that same command. Oh, actually, this is the command. And then I was on the machine. So I'll know you've done that if when I walk around I see your terminal prompt starts with Ubuntu. This is more complex than the thing we did before. So if you have a problem where you're like, I totally forgot, just let me know. So take some time and SSH onto that machine. And if you are a person, this is for the people who don't have AWS accounts right now. If you are one of those people, I want you to go to this site, which is called Katacoda. And you're going to go to Learn. And I want you to go to this Linux and operating systems. And then, this is too fast, Learn Ubuntu, and then Playground. Somebody else has actually already set up an Ubuntu instance for you in this case, so you can like mess around with that. That's all right. We'll deal with that later. All right, go SSH onto your machine.
Go, is your computer dead? Okay. Go to Costco then. I just want to say. Oh.
Yeah, it was
I want you to do this, though. This will get you to, yeah, KATCOD.
Yeah, that's.
He'll show you. It's hard enough to say. Yeah, that's nice.
And then,
Go to Learn.
can you explain what this is?
Yeah, so somebody built this learning platform where they actually do this process for you, like setting up an Ubuntu, where you can then play around, and it's free, and you can use it, and then you can like go to this Linux and operating systems, and then you go to Learn Ubuntu.
What's CentOS? Is that another Linux?
It's another Linux distribution, and then you go to Playground. It's gonna do that for you. So yeah, and then yep, you're in there. And then like if you go back and look at some of those tutorial files, so you're gonna look Linux. Oh, you're Linux and operating systems.
It's literally just like.
And then learn about you. Yep, it's just like a blank computer.
Yeah. And that's the same thing we have to do it on through this thing.
Yeah, like there's nothing on that machine except for the operating system.
That's cool. Do all those stuff, right? It's kind of like basically the same thing. It's a bit of bullshit again, so. It's called Katacoda.
Can you make your terminal like almost full screen? But it's bigger. Alright, so you have to write permission.
Oh, it's because she had that. There's a reason it's been playing this extra. I just,
Oh, secure shell stuff? It's hella.
Yeah, check the data file.
Secure shell.
How's it going? Okay, let's start here and over here. So,
My only chance with it is you know, trying to find out Raspberry Pi. The Raspberry Pi had a UV interface on it. But I couldn't access it because I didn't have to display SSH into the thing using a and it changed the has something called a virtual machine, which is it's an SSH key. It's a secure shell, but it allows you access to the GUI, not only
oh, you bought the cloud thing. Yeah. Wait, is it before? So what you're talking about?
Okay, so it wasn't just me, it was me and my engineer. We were like broken spots sitting in this room, all we had was literally a router, one cable, and my phone to use for. And so, it made some time, rather than
Honestly, you can message me for
to access it so I had to like manually code it.
Cleared out my notes.
It was, no, it's not just showing it.
Oh, yeah.
We were the time.
So, yeah. Yeah. All right, I think you got it. Have the together here. Are you there? Yeah. That's happened. That was my bad. How's it going over here? Cool. All right, very good. How's it going? You there? Oh, very good. Yeah, do it. All right, almost cool. Nice. How's it going? Good.
Ready for your job.
You're ready for a job. I'm going to do my little thing and then I'll come back.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
How are you doing?
Okay. That's okay. All right, if I can have your attention up here. So, you maybe SSH'd into an instance, and like I said, there's an operating system on this instance, and there are some system files, and so if you do ls-a, you can see some of those things. What would you do with this next? And so, like the next thing I would do, let's see if I still have it up here. So from my Ubuntu command line, if I wanted to like have a web server that I could serve files up with, I just Googled this. It's like, okay, well, how do you install Node.js on Linux? I would follow these instructions on that particular command line. But that is about it. So our first objective was that you could set up an AWS EC2 Ubuntu instance and SSH onto the machine. I want you to just think about like what's one thing you learned, or one thing you think is cool, or one thing you think is dumb, like whatever you think. So think about it for a couple of moments. Yeah, related to that first, related to that very first thing, that one and only thing we've done so far. And then turn and talk to your neighbor and just share some of those things. You guys can do it too, even though I know you're not in there yet.
Oh, yeah. You literally type the command SSH. Oh, so it's totally fine. Exit out of that. Oh no, actually look down here. So,
this.
yep.
Oh.
Yeah, that's
right.
That's also not totally off because like it doesn't tell you anything.
Put this all in.
You should copy that and paste it. Like you won't.
I haven't
It won't lose it, but that's fine.
Oh, okay. So start with just this part.
It's over here.
Yeah, actually, you just put SSH in your terminal. Let's see what it says.
I just like I got lunch.
You actually, your computer comes with SSH installed. And so it's just saying, you can use SSH, this is not how to
Oh, yeah.
So then, what you want to do is you want to change into your downloads folder. So CD space
Never make a Roman code.
tilde / downloads.
It's a better thing, for sure.
And then you tab.
It's definitely not.
Yeah, and then just change that to LS that to yeah.
I think I drank a little too much last night.
Okay, perfect. So I'll come back, but you're getting closer. You can actually follow the HMOD instruction. It'll show you.
All right, wrap it up. From people I haven't heard from at this session, what's something interesting you learned or did or got excited about or didn't?
Why did Amazon make their own SQL?
Why do they make their own
What's
SQL?
the benefit?
That's a really good question, actually. And so if you are a developer at a company and you use Mice or SQLite for a project, eventually throughout the life of your project, you'll install SQLite onto a machine, and then you're going to have to manage and maintain it. Like when bug patches come out, you're going to have to manually update that software yourself. If it falls over, you're going to have to fix it.
Okay.
The managed service, Amazon does that for you. They do the bug fixes. They, like, if it blows up, they deal with it. So you are taking like a hat off so you can just focus on being the app developer of whatever your application is.
Okay.
Yeah. That took me 2 years to honestly like understand why these managed services are popular. Other things are also very expensive. Other things. Someone tell me SSHing onto something was like the coolest thing you've ever done.
It really removed a lot of the like mystery around it. It's not any one thing. It's just the whole thing. It's like kind of like, what the hell is AWS?
Oh, that's
Like,
fair.
like-
Just knowing what AWS is.
Like and being able to work with it just a little bit. I doubt we've covered all of it.
Oh, no, not at all. I mean, I use like 5 AWS services at my job, and there's like 50 of them. So, other things you learned. Yep, you guys.
Oh, I was just a question. Well, one, history blew my mind. And this is really cool. I don't know what I would use this for, but
We didn't get to like the interesting part of how you might use it. And so like at my job, when a client signs on with us, they will, in our statement of work, we'll say, okay, we're going to set up all your EC2 instances. We're going to set up a bunch of other complicated like security stuff. We're going to install Kubernetes on it. We're going to install some of your applications on it and make sure that your users can get access to your applications. And so that's some of what Devops is, stuff like that.
Is it pretty much like privatizing like supercomputing, like where you can pay Amazon to like do supercomputing stuff?
Yeah, you can. So we bought a very small EC2, or we didn't buy, we're borrowing a very small EC2 instance. Let's say you are working with a data science team and they need computers that have a lot of CPU, or maybe they are doing so much processing they need graphics, like a GPU. You can specify all of that with AWS and say, like, I want this computer that is optimized for CPU usage. So like some of our clients, we will look at their apps and we'll say to them, like, this app uses a ton of memory but very little CPU, and you can actually save money on AWS by switching the instance type that you're using. And so if that made you interested, maybe look into Devops. You had a question?
no, I didn't.
Yes.
So what does dynamically flexing look like, or do you guys like? So like you said, maybe you're scaling up for users, or you're using more processing power.
Mm-hmm.
So you went selecting EC2. Does it have some sort of like checkbox in there, like if I put 17 more users on here, go boot up a new one, or buy a bigger space?
Yeah, absolutely. So in Amazon, you can set up auto-scaling groups, and it's where Amazon will look at metrics, and you can actually see your metrics for your instance if you go to monitoring. And so you can actually see, like, probably when I signed on to this instance, my CPU utilization went up, or like what's happening on the network in. There's a ton of data you can get, but basically you say, okay, When CPU utilization hits like 80% of the machine, then at that point I want Amazon to give me another one. And then it'll be like, bloop, I made like an identical machine somewhere else. So now you have two computers running. You're like, if that one like hits 80%, then bloop, another one. Yeah. Yeah, now.
Does it hide all the, like, does it make that transparent to the user so that like I'm always going to the same web address and stuff?
Yeah. Yeah, usually what happens is there's a load balancer that the user's request hits, and then the load balancer is like, I'm going to send that request to this machine, or like this one, or whatever. So, yeah.
Can you have multiple instances on one computer?
Like the actual, like,
So my computer, can I just have multiple instances?
oh yeah, you could like literally like have like 10 instances, and you could open a new tab in your terminal and SSH into each instance.
I mean on your own computer,
Oh.
just like an operating system itself.
Yeah, you can.
I don't know why you would do it.
You can set up dual booting on some computers where you choose what operating system
Yeah,
you're going to
that's what I have
use.
set up. Would I use an example of 2 instances?
Kind of. You're actually getting into like what is virtualization and like how could I run a virtual, like what if I wanted to run, what if I needed to test, I have users that use the Windows operating system, but I have a Mac computer. Like you can set up ways of virtualizing a Windows operating system on your machine. That's actually where Docker is neat, because the virtual machines took a lot of your actual computer to operate, and Docker and those containers, they do the same thing, but they use way less of the actual computer they're on. So, all right, 2 other ahas. Yes. That's a good question. So Docker is usually used to create those microservices, to containerize them. So yes, usually when someone's talking about microservices, Docker is part of that. Yeah.
So I just have a question. Let's just say I have like a file on my computer and I want to just move it to my other virtual machine. Is there a way to do that directly? So I have a website and I've been using GitHub to just push my changes to that Git repository.
Yeah, absolutely.
Do that?
Yeah, so what you could do is on this Ubuntu instance, you could actually set up Git, and you like configure and you say, this is my Git username, this is my password, and then once you have Git set up, then you would say git clone, and then whatever the address of that code is, and then it could be downloaded on here. There's like a lot of different ways of moving files from one machine to the other, which sounds very simple, but becomes like a thing you have to do a lot in DevOps. So you can use Git, you can use the program curl. You could say like curl, like go get the files that live at this URL and like copy them onto this machine. But that is something you can do. All right, these 2.
So this is literally just like downloading Linux on your computer, like well, again because I downloaded it. So like it's just like a new terminal for you, right?
Yes, you were like, it's basically like this machine is like a brand new computer. You know, when you came to Flatiron and you probably installed a gajillion things and you had no idea what was going on, you configured Git in GitHub while you did that. And so you would go through the same process, but from this command line. Isn't that cool? Here, and then Evan.
I was just going to say, wouldn't S3 be a really easy way to just go back and forth?
Yeah. Yeah, so S3 is AWS's like storage service. And so it's kind of like Dropbox or Google Docs or the Google Suite, where you just like upload something there and then you can get a URL to get that stuff up there.
What if you wanted to, like, do any of these web services have like some sort of GUI to them that you can just like run?
Oh yeah, totally. So like so AWS has a command line interface. So your computer does not have this on it unless you've installed it on it, but AWS has like literally all of their services you can interact with from the command line. And so let's see, AWS EC2 help. And then, so I can like do all of this stuff from the command line. And the other half of that is, like what we did today is we set up this instance from a GUI. So normally what happens at my job, when you talk about infrastructure as code, we use tools where you set up instances with code instead of manually clicking through the GUI. So yes, most things like this have a GUI, although I don't know if there's a way to SSH through a GUI. All right, last question.
We're skipping Evan, and I feel bad about that, but we need to terminate this thing, don't we?
Yeah, that's a good, yes, we're almost done. So terminating your instance. This instance, it probably won't cost you much, but you always want to shut down these toy products because they do have your credit card. And if you're accidentally doing a bunch of stuff, they will charge your credit card. So the way to terminate your instance is don't terminate. You three who haven't SSH'd in, don't do this yet. You go to Actions, and then you go to Instance State, and then you terminate. And it's like, are you positive? Yes.
Can you see your utilization live as you do stuff? Or is it not live? Is there a way to see it live?
I don't know. That's a good question. Amazon has a special monitoring feature that probably shows it live.
Is there a way to limit interaction with it? For example, I watch a lot of scam baiters, and they'll find people hosting malicious websites, and they'll set up Python scripts that just repeatedly spam their server whatever they're hosting on. Can you set up rate limits with AWS?
I'm not. I suspect you can. You probably at my job we use Nginx to be the ingress. So then we have rate limiting there. So yes and no. All right. So our second objective, which we didn't get to, was define DevOps. And this is not all of DevOps. DevOps, there's a lot of testing and deploying things automatically. But one thing you do in DevOps is you often set up these types of instances. So if that's something that's interesting to you, very cool. Also, there's not a lot of boot camp grads who go into DevOps, and I always find it's interesting. It's it's a thing you can go into. Honestly, DevOps engineers usually get paid more than web developers. And so if you like this and you're interested in it, look into it. Yes, I would say go to my Getting Into DevOps page. Also, on the Denver Dev Slack, I have a Getting Into DevOps channel. That's literally what it's called. So join that channel, and we'll chat. So that's it. Thank you very much. If you weren't able to SSH onto your machine, but you're close, please stick around. I'll get you set up. And that's that.
Thank you.